Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. April was a little bit of a weird month for me. I'm in the middle of several books, but didn't finish a whole lot. This past month, I completed 5 novels, 3 adult fantasy, 1 YA romance, and 1 adult science fiction. The first 3 novels that I finished are all part of a trilogy, the Glass Alliance trilogy by Joanna Hathaway. The first book is called Dark of the West. I did a full review of Dark of the West, but essentially this is a World War II inspired historical fantasy. And when I say World War II inspired, I don't mean it's like a copy paste of the World War II story that we're all familiar with, a good versus evil story. It just draws elements from that period of history and elements from the militaries that were available at the time. However, you can see the inspiration and parallels drawn from current history, but it's not just events directly isolated to the World War II theaters of war, especially when we're talking about displacement of peoples and revolutions arising. But man, I loved Dark of the West, which is the first book of the trilogy. The second book is called Storm from the East. And the third book is called Southern Sun, Northern Star, which came out last month. Every single book in this trilogy was so strong. As a whole, the trilogy itself is excellent. The character building became more complex throughout the story. Our 2 main characters are definitely in the thick of it when it comes to war or revolution, and they have to make some harsh decisions, and you really start to see how war affects people, both those people who are innocent and those people who are fighting in it, whatever their reasons are. But one thing that intrigued me about this trilogy is, as I said, it's not a good versus evil story. And our characters are, for the most part, fighting on opposite sides of this larger conflict. And they're doing it for reasons that you really truly come to understand, even as they do things that make you feel uncomfortable. Especially in book 2 and 3, there were times when I would read about what the characters were doing and I would just feel sick to my stomach because it's not easy. This is not an easy read. It really does kind of tackle the idea of war and how it impacts people. However, there is so much hope wrapped up into the story. It's definitely not grim, dark horror. It doesn't get super grisly, even as bad things do happen. And of course, there is the underlying storyline of this romance that had happened, this connection that happened between 2 characters, and how is that going to affect events. But it's an inspiring thread in this whole trilogy is both of them are fighting for peace, but in different ways. When I finished the 3rd book, I basically just laid down on my floor and just had to think about it. It's just highly recommended. Great character building and development. The interactions between characters are fantastic. It's a story about friendship and loyalty and doing what you believe is right. And I just want everyone to read this trilogy. It is so good. It is so good. The next book that I read is a young adult romance called Never Saw You Coming by Erin Hahn. I was lucky enough to receive an advanced ebook copy through NetGalley to read and review. This is the 3rd book by Erin Hahn that I have read. However, this book stands out to me because both main characters in this story are teenagers, 17, 18 years old, and they are struggling with the Christian church in some way. If there's anyone who has been raised in a conservative household, whether that be due to religion or other reasons, I think that you would find common ground and really kind of relate to some of the things that are being talked about in this story. Sex before marriage, is it bad? How do people, especially young girls, view their bodies? How is that impacted by the community and the environment that they are raised in? And in this book, it is a pretty conservative arm of the Protestant Christian church. The father of one of the characters was a pastor who's actually jailed for stealing money from the church and wielding his power in ways that would sexually abuse women. Other character has just found out that her mother had gotten pregnant as a teen, and then her true biological father had then died in a car accident driving drunk. And what launches the story is that she goes to her biological father's hometown to meet that side of her family. And these two characters interact, and they're kind of dealing with these issues and this trauma from there. So I think that the book had a lot of important things to discuss, how you balance things that you may believe in versus things that are preached that you may or may not believe in, and how do you reconcile living your life in a way that feels right to you with things that your community may be telling you that you disagree with. I really enjoyed both main characters, and I think that anyone who has kind of grown up in this sort of environment will likely be able to relate to the characters in the story, and those who weren't may just be able to appreciate the perspective. Because first and foremost, I think the author did a very thoughtful job as she approached this very delicate topic, and I imagine that she'll probably get a lot of pushback from this specific community for even writing this book. But as a young adult romance, it was a very sweet romance, and I would recommend it. The last book that I read was an audiobook. It may be an Audible original because I didn't find it on Amazon. It's an adult science fiction called Solitude. This was just a fun story. Basically, the setup is that present day, we have some astronauts on the ISS. We have some astronauts testing a new sort of lift capsule, and everyone is just going throughout their daily business, and a phenomenon occurs. A beam of light that begins to circle slowly around the Earth, and in its wake, there are no people left. By the time this phenomenon has made its way around the Earth once, only two people remain. One is on the International Space Station, and one is down on Earth. So forget trying to figure out what the phenomenon happened. There are more immediate concerns. There is an astronaut stranded up on the International Space Station, and the person left on Earth needs to get to them to try to rescue them, and then from that point they can maybe try to figure out what happened to all these people. So it was a real fun read, kind of like The Martian, where they're just trying to tackle problem after problem after problem. I really enjoyed the narrators. One of the narrators did the performance for another science fiction trilogy that I really enjoyed called Planetside by Michael Mamet. So it was fun to hear him again in this story. And I think if you're looking for kind of a summer read, just a fun read that you don't take too seriously, this one fits the bill. I will say that the author does a little bit of a tick with how they worked their dialogue tags that just bothered me a little bit. However, it wasn't enough to make me turn off the book and stop listening to it. If you have some Audible credits to spare and you're looking for something fun to read, then I'll recommend this one. And that's it for the month. I feel like it was an eclectic collection. Please check out the full review I did for Dark of the West. Please try that book. I'm begging you, and then we can talk about it. The trilogy is complete now, so you can binge read it if you'd like. And aside from that, don't forget to support your local library, and I'll see you next time.